I get invitations from vendors or meeting requests from vendors. They're like, hey, we want to sit down with you because you're the chief procurement officer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like I'm more than happy to sit down with you, but I'm not your customer.
Right.
And from a procurement lens, I am vendor agnostic. I don't care who wins.
All right, welcome to the Pursuit Pod. I'm Mike Vichich, and this podcast focuses on demystifying how companies win government contracts. Today's guest is Jared Ambrosier. Jared was one of the youngest members of Michigan's procurement leadership team, and during his tenure, the office won 6 Cronin Awards, and that's basically the Oscars of government procurement. Michigan is widely recognized as one of the best-run procurement organizations in the country, and Jared and his team are the reason why. So we're excited to spend the time today, Jared. Thank you for making it. I think if you are basically trying to get into government contracting and you want to understand what it looks like to sell into the public sector, this is your episode. And we're going to cover stuff on how do you win your first contract, how do you position yourself before an RFP, how cooperative contracts and resellers work. We'll talk a bit about big contracts like Medicaid or judicial, and how those work, and then also where AI is taking government procurement over the next 5 years. But Jared, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mike. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk about public procurement and how we can kind of increase the competition and increase the supply base.
Love that. So let's start with the scenario where I think a lot of our listeners will be, and that, let's say that they're a cybersecurity company or maybe an HR tech company, or a data analytics company. It doesn't really matter the category, but let's assume that you've got real traction in the commercial market, maybe $20 or $50 million of revenue, but you do not yet have a government contract, right? And everyone says, let's focus on winning a state contract first. Maybe it's Michigan. So with Michigan in mind, let's walk through that path. What does it look like if you are in that boat?
Yeah, so for most states, most public entities, they have some sort of procurement code. This is generally law that dictates how their procurements have to run. Every entity is a little bit different. In Michigan, our procurement code is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to read. And it basically gives us 2 requirements. One, that we have to publicly bid. So things have to be publicly posted. It gives an opportunity for the market to respond, and it has to be posted for a certain amount of time. That is our basic requirements. So what does that mean for you as a supplier? It means, one, you have to know where we're posting public bids.
Yep.
For us, that's on like a vendor portal that we call vendor self-service. For others, that might be in the newspaper. Some entities still have it must be posted in the USA Today, right? Or some might be just posted on their external website. So you need to figure out, where do they post their bids, and then how do they evaluate? What are they looking for in their evaluation process? Do I have to submit it electronically? Do I have to submit it by paper? Hopefully not, but there's still some places out there that you have to submit a paper bid. Yeah. Kind of figure out your base level expectations so you don't make a simple mistake that might really hurt you.
Yeah. So basically a competitive bid, AKA a public bid, is often the baseline. And I think One of the things that I know I hear from vendors is that they think past performance is a binary thing, right? Because a lot of the government solicitations will say that you need to have been, doing government contracting, for instance, for 3 years. And so I think folks believe, you can tell us, rightly or wrongly, that if you don't have government experience, you're dead in the water. Is that true?
No, I wouldn't say that's true. I would say it's a gradient. So when we look at experience, we look at size and scope. So have you performed in a similar size? That could be geographically, let's say it's healthcare coverage, right? Yeah. Have you performed in a state, with X amount of counties and X amount of people? It could be size dollar wise, have you held a contract of $10 million, $20 million, etc. And then scope, what is it that we're actually looking for? And so if you only have private sector experience or commercial experience and you're moving into the public sector, you might not have the same size and you might not have the same scope, but you may have relevant experience that would still count. So in Michigan, often what we see is we ask for 3 experiences of similar size and scope, and there is a weight associated with each of those experiences. So let's say we are weighting them each at 5 points out of a total 100 points for the bid. So you might have 15 points that are allocated towards experience. And let's say you're coming from a commercial, you've done some large contracts, maybe national contracts, but nothing in the public sector. And we might say, okay, for that experience, it's not government, it's not exactly what we're looking for, but it has some similarities. We'll give you 3 out of 5 points. And generally, the way states work is they have a cutoff. So it's not, oh, you lost 5 points, you're out. It's out of 100 points, you have to have a passing grade so that you could be considered. Or you must have, some states use it where they actually award based on points. In Michigan, we award based on best value. So we use our points as you have to have 80%. So you can lose up to 20 points, 20% of the points, if it's not a 100 scale, throughout the bid and still be considered for an award at the end of the day. And many states have similar processes and procedures related to that.
So I think that's a super key point, and I just want to put summarize it and tell me if I do a good job capturing it. You're saying if I, as a vendor, had a contract with a 35,000 person insurance company that had a wide geographic range of coverage and had maybe similar complexities as it relates to compliance with certain laws, that still carries weight, even if it is not, quote unquote, a public sector deal. I can make the argument that scale and scope is scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, some entities may say they're looking only for government experience, and then you might have to sell it a little bit. But I know in Michigan, we ask that size and scope question. That's our standard phrasing when we look at experience.
So your recommendation would be, even if they say that they're looking for government experience, not similar size and scope experience, what it sounds like you would say is, as a respondent, break that government experience thing down into contract size, into number of people supported, into geographic diversity, right? Like audit requirements, government compliance, like whatever those different things are, whatever those headings are, break it down and talk about your experience on each of those. Were there any like major headings that you think I didn't cover there?
I think that like public facing is a big one, like where your contract may be with an entity, but the end user of that contract or the impact on that contract is actually like a public person. I think that's a good one to highlight too, because that's pretty much all state contracts. Maybe not all, but 85% of them, the end user is often not the government entity that is working on the project.
Right. So something that involves working with like what a government would consider a constituent, for instance, would be useful.
Yes, exactly. So to go to your insurance example, right? Maybe you've built a system that is for the insurance company, but the insured is logging into it and has a portal that they're using, right? Then you kind of have that constituent and agency side of the project, and you can show both pieces.
Got it. Love that. And so let's talk a little bit about the ideal entry point. I've heard others say that going straight for a state contract is a high bar. And, one easier entry point might be a city or a K-12 district or a county. What's your take?
I would agree with that. Attacking state level contracts is going to be difficult. Now, if you're a super mature company that's been around in the commercial space for a long time, you have, an experienced team that's used to responding to formal, like requests for proposals and things like that, then sure, it might be worth your while to go after. But if you're a smaller company or a company that's not as comfortable responding to formal bids, I would start at a county, a city, township, local unit of government. or school or education side first. I think the barrier to entry is lower, just based on size and scope being smaller.
Right. Right. Yep. So if you don't have comparable size and scope, go to a place where you do. And I think, if I put myself in the mindset of a vendor selling to government, they think, okay, I hear that, but, is the complexity really that much lower? Like now there's, tons of cities and counties or school districts that I could go after, and I don't really know where to start. So I'm starting to lose the plot. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I should just stick with the commercial sector, So I guess like the question I would value your take on related to that is, like what should I look for, right? Like, are there signals that would tell me that this city or this county might be willing to work with a company like mine? Like, what would you look for?
So the first thing I would look for is, have they already had their transformation?
Hmm.
So I think when you look across government, or public entities, there's still a lot of entities who have not made a digital transformation, right? And so just speaking on the gov tech side,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot that are still using legacy systems, maybe mainframe, right? Maybe COBOL, right? Like they're using legacy systems that are 20, 30, 40 years old,
Yep.
or they're using a paper process.
Right.
And so if you see opportunities where companies are transforming into the digital age, web 3.0, whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
that could be a really good opportunity to come in and say, hey, let's re-envision how you are doing your work today, and this is how we can do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a great indicator that they are open to, not the status quo, right? Because they're already doing the hard work of, we have to go through a digital transformation.
Right.
It doesn't really matter at that point, do you use an established vendor? Well, there is no established vendor, right? Like they've never done this. So that might be a good opportunity to come in and be able to present an attractive option for them.
Yeah. Totally. I think that that point of like there is no established vendor is a key one. And I have heard conversations, with vendors who, for instance, they might look for the paper process and they'll think like, we should pitch these people because we can really help them. But I think you're hitting at something that is a very critical point, which is if they are on paper and they're starting a transformation, or they've talked about a transformation, or maybe even, I know one thing you and I have talked about in the past is like they've hired a new CIO, or there's someone new in the who works there. That might be a good sign. And I think I'd welcome your take on what are the public, like just looking at a government entity from the outside. What could you see that might tell you that they're more progressive or willing to take a different look at things?
Sure. I mean, new administration is
Yeah.
always a good time to take a look, because they're going to have pet projects,
Yeah.
right? And especially at a local government level, a mayor coming in, he might really want to like make his mark, right? Or she might want to, put a stamp on, this is what my tenure here did,
Yeah.
and use that as a stepping stone, right, to their next political role. And I think a lot of cities are in that space right now of transitioning. If they haven't transitioned already, they're looking to transition. And so
Yep.
new administrations might be like, hey, this is where I can make my mark. I can get a huge kind of bureaucratic win
Yep.
internally, like administrative win behind the scenes. And then I can do some, more public things as well to, increase my visibility or my name recognition or what have you.
Yeah. And I guess like how do I test that quickly as a vendor? How do I test quickly whether someone is amenable to like me as a new vendor? Would you like literally say to them, hey, we haven't done government work before. Here's the sort of work we have done, but we are investing in this space. Is that something you consider? Like, would you be that open and transparent with them?
Yeah, I would actually approach it a little bit differently, but I would be that direct or that open. And I would say more like, um, we've never done business in the public sector before. What challenges do you foresee for me in this space?
Yeah.
And let them kind of name the like, well, we typically look for people with government experience, or you might not know like these channels that we have to go to. And then it gives you an opportunity to respond back. to be like, you're right, we don't know that space, that's an area we're going to have to learn, but we've done this and we think that would translate well to a government process.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Cool. Let's segue a bit to like the next step in the process, which is, related to the competitive bidding and maybe
Mhm.
the click one click upstream from that. Because I think one thing that we constantly hear from vendors is they literally say, if I find out about an RFP when it drops, I've already lost. And they'll say that their win rates for an RFP response, cold RFP response, are like in the low single digits. Um, but there's a right way and a wrong way to build relationships before an RFP hits. So could you walk us through the right way to do it?
Sure. um, get to the end user. I would say that is the most critical thing.
Yeah.
I hear vendors a lot, or I get invitations from vendors or meeting requests from vendors. They're like, "Hey, we want to sit down with you because you're the chief procurement officer."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, like I'm more than happy to sit down with you, but I'm not your customer."
Right.
And from a procurement lens, I am vendor agnostic. I don't care who wins. It doesn't matter to me. I want to see the best. But that end user, the customer, they're the ones that might come in with some pre-established opinions
Right.
on where they want to get to. Maybe not a pre-picked vendor, but they might be like, I want a product that does this, or I want a product that has this functionality in it because they've seen that functionality somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's at a trade show or conference, speaking to a peer
Yeah.
or from a sales pitch.
Yeah.
And then they can come in with their requirements and they're like, hey, we want this next iteration of this system to include this functionality because we think it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
And so
Totally.
I always tell people, find your customer and talk to them first,
Yeah.
not to necessarily gain an advantage. Like, not like, and what I mean by that is, I don't think you're going to influence them in a way that says, like, I want company A.
Yeah.
That actually very rarely happens. I know people think that that's common. That's pretty rare. What more often we see is, I want certain functionality,
Yeah.
uh, or I didn't know that I wanted this, right? If it's something that they hadn't considered previously, you might be able to kind of sell them on, you know, upgrading a process, right? A
Yeah.
paper process to a digital one.
Yeah.
They might not have considered that. Or
Yeah.
you can automate this, what you're currently doing manually. They may not
Yeah.
have considered that. And so
Right.
you can kind of grow those opportunities from nothing into oh, we want to buy something like this.
Yeah.
We'd be interested in your product, but we are also interested in the market of products around this.
Yeah.
But the other piece is, I think it does gain you an advantage because you can learn more about your customer.
Right.
And I think that advantage is actually more important,
Yeah.
is understanding your customer's pain points,
Yeah.
understanding your customer's business, being able to tailor your bid response to the customer as opposed to your out of the box pitch that you give everybody.
Right.
That's where I think building those relationships can really help, is understanding what they're really looking for and
Right.
making sure that your bid matches that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think again, like I try to put myself in the respondent's chair here. And the maybe the litmus test that I would recommend people think about is like every word in the RFP response should be load bearing, right? Like
Mhm.
no fluff and load bearing for that person and organization. So if it's like a generic sentence that could apply to like literally any government agency, that's probably a good indication that you don't know the user well enough and you don't understand their pain and what they're trying to solve well enough. And that should be a red flag, or at least a yellow flag in your mind, that like you got to do some more homework.
Yeah.
And so what I hear when I hear you answer is there's two big parts. Number one is understanding the people, and I want to unpack that a bit. And the second part is understanding the problem, because I think like let's talk about the people. So you had just said that for you in procurement, you're not the end user, right? Like your role is to make sure that you're getting the best value and that you're considering, first of all, that you're following the statutes, but that you're considering all the available options and that you are a partner to the business user, helping them
Right.
get the best outcome. But it's their decision at the end of the day, as long as some requirements are met, right? And so, I guess when I think about understand the user, could you unpack that a bit? Because there's probably different layers, right? Like there might be the head of an organization, let's say the CIO. There might
Mhm.
be, directors and managers below them. There might be users of the product in other functions. So how do you think about understanding the user? Would you spend time with all of them? How would you distribute
Yeah,
that
so
time?
I think you did a good job of laying it out, right? You kind of have this pyramid of you might have the director of the department, right? Okay, they might have a pet project, something that they want to like see completed during their time there,
Hmm.
but they don't probably really know the direct problems or the direct challenges that are associated with that.
Right.
Uh, and so you have to get down to that like manager level of the people who are actually using the product every day.
Hmm.
I think that is key. They're the ones that know the pain points. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. They know where changes need to be made. Uh, I would say that is kind of your critical point. And so I would when meeting, it's again, it's good to kind of meet with those higher level people, but your more valuable conversations may actually occur with downstream folks.
Yeah. Right.
Um, just
And
because they
how
know they know the business better.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, again, like empathizing with the government people who are trying to make the best decision that they can. This might not be something that it might not be a decision that they're making every year, right? Like they may evaluate
Right.
these things once every 5 years or sometimes more than
Or
that.
longer. Yeah.
Yeah, or longer. And like the world changes, and so if you're not for a vendor, you're in the habit of pitching this stuff every day. So you're like really dialed into what's new and whereas if you are a buyer you might need to be brought along, right? Like you might need to be
Yeah.
educated on how the market has evolved in a certain regard. And I think sometimes people think of that as like influencing, but I think of it as educating in a way, right? It's like helping people understand the art of what is actually possible and doing that in a way that is like married with their business problems. So that's kind of the second part that you brought up around understanding the problems. It's on the one hand, it sounds like you're downloading the things that they view as pain points. They probably also have some preconceptions on the solution, but they might not understand the full picture. And if you're a vendor trying to build trust, like that education piece, I think, tell me your thoughts, is a phenomenal way to actually build trust in with a vendor.
I agree. It's not coming in with a hard sell to
Right.
start, but coming in with an open mind
Yeah.
and that listening ear. I think is very important. People get turned off by a hard sell, to
Totally.
be quite honest. And then they know that they have to go through a procurement process anyways,
Right.
right? So it's like, yeah, you're selling me this. This sounds great. We're gonna bid it in a year, and
Yeah.
and we'll see if you win.
Yeah. Right. Tell me that you don't get me without telling me you don't get me,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so one of the other things I think is interesting that you've mentioned, I think people often have a preconception on the vendor side that being an incumbent is always a net positive, right? But I think one of the things that I've learned from you is there's this like I don't know if you would call it this, but like incumbentitis, where
yeah,
there's a perception among the government users that the incumbents aren't trying as hard and that their pricing maybe gets out of whack with the market. So talk to me about resolicitations, and if there's an incumbent and the contract is being rebid, what should we make of that? Like, how do
sure.
you get? Yeah, what do you make of that?
So we definitely use the term incumbentitis. And we have it in like some of our public training materials,
Oh,
even
you
when we
do?
do contracting 101. And it's more so the incumbent making assumptions. Oh, you've done business with us. We don't need to explain that because you know how we work.
Right.
And it's like, no, every bid is a blank slate. So we come in blank slate, and you have to explain to us who you are and what you do, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's kind of item number one. You're right that sometimes market wise, they think they have the business, and so they don't necessarily come in as competitive as somebody who's eager or wanting to break in would.
Right.
Um, uh, from a procurement standpoint, I mean it when we say it. We are vendor agnostic. We do not care. I don't care if an incumbent has had it for 20 years. Okay, we're still going to bid it. We're still going to decide on the best value. Now, the incumbent comes in with some maybe challenges, right? Because if they've been, let's say, a mediocre performer, right? You might have some people that really like them, and some people that are like, man, they could do so much better.
Right.
But they do know the business. I think
Right.
that's where the incumbent has that inherent advantage because they know the business, they know what's being done today. And so they come in with that knowledge that others may not have.
Their words are more load bearing because of that.
Yeah. And I do like what you said about that earlier about load bearing the words. We see a lot of bids where companies just put in marketing fluff.
Right.
And not a little bit, like hundreds of pages of marketing fluff. It's not valuable to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would encourage people like distill your proposal down to what is being asked for, provide the details necessary to respond to the question.
Mm-hmm.
Like the marketing fluff is not necessary.
Yeah.
But to get back to that incumbent versus a challenger, everybody comes in equal, and we really do look at that. What is the best value to the state? Which could be, price is always a component of that. It's not always the most important one, and many times it's not. You have to be fair market, but not necessarily low price. Who you're putting on staff.
Can we take a TO on that?
Sure.
Can you explain the difference between like best value versus low price?
Sure. So best value is you're buying a house, right? Or you're buying bulletproof vests.
Yeah.
I don't really want to buy the cheapest bulletproof vest for my state police, right, to use. I want to buy a bulletproof vest that is of market price, not outrageously priced, but that has high quality, high safety standards, right? That fits the need of the department, right? That might have like collaboration with other pieces of equipment that they use, right? Maybe it works better with the like the body cam that they use, right? Or the taser, what have you, right? So all those things come together. Very simple example. I think in a normal person's world, I like to use the house example. You're buying a house, you need, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Then your realtor gives you a bunch of houses. You don't go to the cheapest one and be like, well, that's the cheapest one that has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. You go and you look at them and you figure out what works for you and your family. Maybe the layout of one is, more beneficial. Maybe it's located next to a school and you have young kids and they can walk to school and that's the best value. Right. Maybe it has a pool and you're like, I never want to have a pool. Yeah. And then another person would look at it and be like, oh, a pool would be awesome. So that best value is a little bit subjective to the end user.
Yeah.
But it's their budget, right? It's their money. They're the ones that are going to be working with it. You do want that subjective piece to say what is going to fit best for the challenge that I have today.
Right.
So that's Michigan is a best value state. We do best value on probably 90 to 95% of our bids. The low cost bids are ones that are very commoditized items where really like as long as you meet the specs for gravel, we're going to choose you if you're the lowest cost.
Right. Yeah. And that the low cost versus best value is that typically found in the solicitation documents?
Yeah, that would be kind of in the proposal instructions. Other states do best value a little differently. A lot of other states do high point. And so you get your points for your technical proposal, and then they would score your pricing. And then the bid that had the highest score would be the best value. We don't do that in Michigan. That's a little formulaic, for my opinion, on how to determine best value. But that's how many other states operate.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. It's one thing that I think before spending time on this, you might assume that a more formulaic approach is what gets to the best answer. But, my personal opinion is judgment. People have judgment. Like, no two situations are the same. letting people
Right.
make the decision that they feel is in their organization's best interest. I think that's how you, in my opinion, get to the best answer. But good to know on how all the different flavors that are out there. Let's move on to timing and prioritization. This is something I know you and I have talked about in advance.
Sure.
So let's say the scenario is there's a contract that's expiring, an IT contract that's expiring, for instance. How far in advance should I be engaging with that entity to get to understand the people and understand their problems? Like, how far in advance of that contract renewal ought I be working? And maybe don't just answer for IT, but give us, kind of for the different categories, how far in advance do you
Yeah.
think someone should go?
So on an IT project, let me pause. So first, when we look at our contracts, there's going to be base years and option years.
Yeah.
When you think about engaging, I think it is safe to make the assumption that option years are going to be exercised.
Okay.
For in Michigan, unless we have a problem with a vendor where they are not performing, we are going to exercise option years. That's pretty much like that is how we operate.
Yeah.
And so that's not to say don't reach out, but when you think about your timeline, if a contract's, let's say, a 5-year contract with 5 option years, and you come in at year 4 of the base contract and you're like, well, I'm really excited for you to rebid this, you should expect them to say, well, we plan to exercise the option years on this, and it'll actually be available in 4 more years.
Right.
Now, that being said, when we're looking at the end of life of a contract, on an IT contract, I would probably reach out 2 years to 18 months before the end of that contract.
Got it.
The larger the contract, the longer the time.
Before the end of the option years. So in your case,
Yeah.
if it's 10-year, 5-year with 5-year contract with 5 1-year extensions, you're saying reach out at like year 8 or 8.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to reach out earlier just to see, like, hey, do you guys expect to use your option years? Are you planning to rebid this?
Yep.
Get like a lay of the land.
Yeah.
But once you know the lay of the land and when it's actually going to expire, 18 months to 2 years before the end of that period. The larger the contract, the earlier it is. Right. If it's let's say it's a large CRM system that has some customizations and some interfaces, you probably want to reach out 2 years before, right? Because we like to bid things with time to transition to a new vendor if necessary.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to go out to bid for something, 18 months to a year in advance if we can. Now, sometimes that ends up being 9 months or 6 months, but we try to be ahead of the game. You don't want to be up against the last, month of the contract negotiating your new contract.
Yep.
So we try to build some time in there. As for an IT contract, for a professional services or commodities contract, you're probably good reaching out in that like 18-month to 1 year mark, because their bid time frames can be a little bit shorter, a little bit less transition responsibilities. They're probably bidding it in that like year to 9 month range is probably their goal of when they want to get it on the street.
Yeah. And do you think it's fair to say, so you talked about maybe doing a heat check, before the renewal periods, right? Do you think it's fair to say that like you have to talk to somebody or maybe a couple of people to get a real read on that? Or is there any, public way of doing it? I think in a vendor's mind, if I could like find that out for every insert name of vendor contract at scale, that's like preferable. But oftentimes in life, like the hard thing is the best thing. And so I'm just curious, like, do you feel like you have to reach out, to those people and get an understanding?
Yeah, the best way would probably be like an email. Like, hey, I see you have a contract for XYZ, and I see that it has option years available. Do you intend to use those option years, or are you planning to go out to bid early?
Got it. Cool. Yep.
And then that can kind of
straightforward, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, straightforward. And if they say like we're not sure, then you can ask like, would you be willing to have a sit down? I would love to discuss like that program area.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's step through. One of the things that you've also talked about is in the Midwest, let's say if Michigan and Ohio and Indiana all have similar RFPs coming out on similar timelines, vendors are going to have to prioritize. You as the government agencies, you also know that, right? And
Yes.
you know that not everyone can have the A team. So like what sort of advice would you have to vendors when if there's multiple contracts coming out, how they should think about responding to them?
So I think you need to think about how many A teams do you have?
Yeah,
Um,
actually, not in some
Actually,
fictitious way.
not like you need to make that decision on how many teams do we have that are top quality.
Yeah,
Um, in the IT space, especially, I would say when you look at successes versus failures, it often comes down to individual people,
yeah,
right?
on those project teams.
On those project teams, yeah, like that you had a great project manager, and so it stayed on task and on schedule and on budget.
Yeah,
Or you had a subpar project manager and they weren't on top of it and they let it slip. And now I would really, work on that prioritization and understanding your own strengths and weaknesses before bidding. Because let's say it's your first time, right? You're bidding the first time in Michigan, you win a contract and you fail
yeah,
spectacularly.
you're cooked.
You're cooked, right? It's going to be very difficult for you
Yeah,
to win a second contract. Not to say that you can't, right? But you're going to have a negative performance evaluation on your record. You
yeah,
may have a terminated contract on your record. The business areas talk to each other. Oh yeah, they delivered, the product was great, but implementation was 50% longer and budget was, 30% higher.
right.
Well, like that's not the reputation that you want to start out with.
Yeah, right. Cool. That's good and helpful. I think let's move now to the next topic, which is around contracts or co-ops and
Mhm.
piggybacking. So,
Yeah.
um, I think one thing that everybody, well, not everybody, many people assume is like everything goes through RFP. Um, but the rules say that it needs to be I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that a purchase needs to have been competitively bid. Right? It doesn't say
Yes.
that every agency has to do their own RFP every time, right?
Yep.
And those are distinctions. So, so let's shift into that mindset. So, if there are ways to access government buyers without going through a fresh RFP, we've talked, you and I have talked about how Michigan doesn't really piggyback, but you have this like, was it competitive test? Could you walk us through
Mhm.
how you think about that?
Sure. So I would say first off, if you have a contract within a state with a specific agency, try to expand that contract to other agencies within the state, right? Like we take a category management approach. So if I have a grant management system that my Department of Health and Human Services is using,
Yep.
and um, my Department of Environments and Great Lakes, want to put out a bid for a grant management system, I'm going to say, hey, well, we already have a grant management system that DHHS is using. Let's look at this first. Does this
Yeah.
meet your needs before we go out to bid? So we kind of have that like cooperative contracting even within our own state where we're going to try to leverage our existing contracts before going out to bid.
Yeah.
So that's kind of opportunity one.
Okay.
Um, Within the public procurement space, though, there is a lot of cooperative contracting that occurs. Some of that occurs at state to state level. So, for example, in Michigan, we share a contract with Wisconsin for adult incontinence supplies.
Yeah.
Uh, so, where that's one that we have bid that Wisconsin jumps on with us, and we use our combined spend to leverage a better contract for both of us. So a
Yeah.
very basic cooperative contract. We both went into it together on the front end.
Yep.
Then you have situations where piggybacking, which is where, let's say, like the state of, like again, state of Michigan, we put out something to bid, we award a financial system. And then another state, and let's just use like Missouri, for example, says, hey, Michigan, I see you bid out this. Does your contract allow piggybacking? So could they use a contract that I've already bid, even though they weren't included on the beginning? And I
Right.
would say, well, yeah, my contract allows it. Does your state law allow it?
Yeah.
Right? Because it has to go both ways.
Both ways. So
Uh,
your contract has to say that that this is a contract that's eligible for piggybacking, like that language literally in the bid solicitation in the
Yeah,
contract.
it might not use those exact words, but yeah, some form of, this contract is extendable to other public entities. This contract can be used cooperatively. Everyone's going to have their own flavor of text, but generally, yes, you need to include that language of others can use this contract.
And sorry, that's in is that wording in both the final contract and in the bid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So in Michigan, we have a program called My Deal, which is a cooperative program that we run that allows local units of governments and schools to utilize our contracts. That language also says other states can use the
Got it.
contracts as well. We are extending our purchasing power to others.
Got it.
So that is kind of the classic piggybacking. You have an
Yeah.
existing contract that contains piggybacking language that allows another entity to jump on it.
And by the way, time
Um,
out there. Like
sure.
to go back to the earlier point in the conversation, the procurement teams, whether that's at the state level or if we're talking about at a city, the procurement folks might know that around how piggybacking works and what has to be true. And is it in the state law, right? But maybe a police chief doesn't,
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
so to your point about being a good partner to your agencies, like this is an area where I think vendors can actually be super helpful, is to help the person on the government side who might not be buying this product every year, maybe it's like we said every 10 years, understand the path of how they can navigate. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's fair, and I think from a procurement stance, I would appreciate it going both ways. So, like, if you know that I don't piggyback, or
Right.
that like in the state of Michigan that we don't sell that to my state agency.
Right.
Don't tell the state agency, oh, we have a contract in Indiana that you can use,
Right.
because I'm gonna then they have to be the bad guy and be like, no, you can't use that contract.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you know that Michigan is open to, cooperative contracts and this is what needs to be there, and you check all the boxes and be like, hey, we know what procurement likes to look for in cooperative contracts. This contract includes all of those things. Um, Here's a contract that you could potentially use instead of going out to bid.
Can I ask you about the piggybacking thing? Like, is that in Michigan, is that, and this is like the a specific question that I'll ask about a broader one, which is like in Michigan, is that piggybacking thing actually in statute? Like the fact that Michigan has
Um, Statute allows us to utilize and um, cooperative procurement methods. So it doesn't say piggybacking, it uses the term cooperative procurement methods. Uh, and so that is in statute. Now, our rules around that are not. So, like in Michigan, we look for a few things. We look that the bid that was put out included language that said it could be extended, or that it was intended for it to be extended.
Yep.
We look for the contract to do the same. So you need to tell me up front that, hey, I know this bid is for Indiana, but we're going to let any other state use it.
Yeah.
So that needs to be in the bid. It needs to be in the contract.
Cool.
I look, is it an actual contract? Like, does it contain actual pricing, a scope of work, or is it just fluff?
Right.
Right? Like, and so that's kind of the number two thing. And then the last thing is, who was it that was bidding it?
Right.
Is it an entity that is similar complexity to myself?
Right.
I am very unlikely going to use a contract that was bid by a K to 12 school district.
Right. Back to your
Right,
point
like
of size and scope.
size and scope, but also competitiveness.
Right.
Right, like did that bid that K-12 school district put out drive enough visibility that the vendor community could actually compete on it?
Right.
Those are things that we kind of look at when we look at cooperatives.
Got it.
Right? So there's cooperative organizations, NASPO Value Point being a big one,
Yep.
Sourcewell being another big one, that they are kind of cooperative programs, and so they run cooperative procurements with public entities to offer a portfolio of contracts that you can choose from.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the third kind of realm of
Yeah.
cooperative contracting that's out there.
And I think maybe what would be useful is if you could give the vendor community a little bit of empathy for what, from the government's perspective, what could go wrong if you get this wrong, right? Like Let's say you
Sure.
think something's competitive, but it wasn't. Like, what happens? What's the risk there?
I mean, it could be a court challenge, like a legal challenge, a lawsuit could be filed.
Okay.
Um, it could be that you're just like fiscally not responsible, right?
Yeah.
You're awarding a contract that's costing the state more money than it should.
Yep.
Um,
And what
you could be
happens there? Like
challenged.
someone gets challenged. So there's like legal risk is one, but then
There's
the other
legal
is
risk.
political risk, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, political risk, operational risk to just
Yeah.
be like, man, we could have saved them, a lot of
Yeah.
money if we had done this ourselves or we'd actually been competitive. And then you can get the challenge. You can, oh, I'm a local vendor. You're like, I'm a Michigan company. I wanted to bid on that, and you didn't give me an opportunity to
Yeah. I
bid.
never had the chance. Right.
Right. And that kind of is the more political risk or public risk that comes into play. Um, where you're utilizing contracts that your own homegrown companies didn't get a chance to bid on.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So basically, some local company shows up and said, "Hey, you guys went with insert name of national company. I could have done this cheaper. You used, and this is a hypothetical, obviously, but like you used some K-12 district's contract that wasn't one that we decided to bid on. We could have done it better, faster, cheaper, and we never had a chance to compete. And that's where you get legal,
Yep.
political, operational risk. And
Yeah.
I think is that a fair summary?
Yes, exactly.
How about the local thing? Like, um, is it common for in your experience, like your peers around the country, like are they in this 100-point framework? Like, how much does being local influence that?
Everyone's a little bit different. Some states give points for being a local vendor. Some states include it within that best value. Um, there is reciprocity rules that come into play. So, like, if I'm in Michigan and let's say Ohio gives a preference to Ohio-based businesses, and an Ohio company is bidding in Michigan against a Michigan business, then I need to give that reciprocal preference to a Michigan business. It gets a little complicated, um, but I'd say outside of rules and preferences, every governor wants to see business being awarded to local businesses, whether it's in policy or not.
Yeah.
Right? You want that tax revenue, you want that employment, you want that project, you want your local workers to be working. All of that um, is things that we look for.
Yeah.
So whether it's a hard rule or not, it is something that comes into
It's
play.
there. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as a vendor, you should appreciate that because who's going to be the one state where they don't have that requirement? Everyone else is doing it, but
Right.
like you're going to be the state where you're not really doing it, especially if you're a state that has meaningful purchasing power. It's a big
Sure.
lever. And one of the related to this whole like competitive bid and getting the chance to compete thing, I just want to spend a minute talking about the reseller model in Michigan. And I think if I have my facts
Sure.
straight, Michigan has state contracts with a few different resellers. So if you wanted to buy a software product and you're competing those resellers against one another,
That is
even if they carry the same product, how does that work? How do you think about competitive bidding when there is a reseller in the mix?
Yeah. So resellers are kind of a necessary thing in the software space. That's how a
Yeah.
lot of companies go to market, right? They don't have direct sales teams. They know that they can get broader reach through a reseller. And so to get to those same product portfolios, we have to contract in similar ways.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have a program that has multiple resellers in it where we can compete those resellers against each other, whether it's on the same product or on similar products.
Mm-hmm.
And that can kind of encourage that competition so that it's a second layer of competition, right? That first layer was those initial contracts. And then we put a second layer in when we are making, software selections as well. It's not without some flaws or some challenges because you have multiple layers of terms. If the software has to be implemented, you have multiple layers. You might even have another layer of terms within that.
Yeah.
There may be product specific terms that need to get added. right? Whether it's cybersecurity because of the type of data that's being
Right.
included, or AI language because it has AI built in, embedded in the product.
Yeah.
And so those are all things we have to consider when we think about our software models, and how we go to market, or how we solicit bids and enter into agreements on software.
Yep. So, and I just like to unpack that for folks. Essentially, what you're saying, I think what you're saying is there's the end vendor, right? You call it the vendor. Sometimes it's called the manufacturer. Sometimes it's called the OEM.
Sure.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the government entity, right? And in the middle, there can be one or two layers
Yeah.
that are distributors, resellers, systems integrators, and there's a variety of reasons why those parties exist. And you covered those reasons. It might be that there's customizations that have to be done. Maybe there's extensions that have to be done. Sometimes it might just be that they're on the contract, and like you said, that OEM has a practice of always going through the channel to fulfill
Sure.
a government related contract. So there's a bunch of different reasons why. um, I guess, like, if just so I'm clear, if I'm an OEM and my commercial terms conflict with the state's requirements, or with the FAR or one of these things, right? From like a data security, from a liability, from an insurance and indemnification point of view, a termination point of view,
Yep.
I as an OEM can let a reseller deal with that. Is that a fact?
You can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Now, to what level they will do it, right, is going to depend on that relationship and how
Right.
much authority you kind of give with them. Because those terms need to flow down, right? So let's
Yep.
say we have the reseller accepting our terms, we're expecting those terms to flow down to that OEM at
Right.
some level. You might not have to negotiate, every time with us, right? You come, so it can offer opportunities to assist in the contracting process.
Right. And depending on the term category, for instance, insurance versus like a security requirement, the level of flow down may be different, right? Like, is it true, and to what extent is it true that, like, if a reseller holds a contract with a SaaS vendor and there's some cybersecurity requirements, those are the sort of thing that are more likely to flow down. Obviously, the reseller doesn't have any
Sure.
influence on whether the OEM gets breached, right? But
But
for an insurance requirement or other things like that, that is something that the reseller could, for practical
yeah,
reasons, get
yeah,
off.
and sometimes it comes into play in that, like, contractor subcontractor, like the in or reseller OEM in their contract, that
Right.
we're not necessarily privy to, but how they kind of handle that piece of it.
Yeah. So what's the state like? I mean, and I'm curious, like, how would you and your peers kind of like double click into that relationship between the reseller and the vendor? It seems, or the vendor slash OEM. It seems really challenging to do on every contract. Plus, you don't have any, like,
Yeah.
do you have a legal right to be able to see their contract? You don't.
No, and sometimes you don't want to,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
You want that, like, I've contracted with you, prime vendor. It's your responsibility to ensure your subcontractor is performing.
Right.
And so if they don't, you're on the hook for that.
Right.
Right. So there is, like, there
Yeah,
are legal
back to
reasons
your
why we
house
wouldn't
analogy. Same with the insurance of the GC versus the electrician, for instance.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. Cool. Just to follow up in something I've heard from another state. So when procurement teams are understaffed, which I think many government entities are having staffing challenges today, there's a temptation to bundle multiple needs. You and I talked about this other state where there were, like, some state agency leaders said that, we plan to buy 15 things in technology this year, and we want to group them together so that there's, all the procurement hoops that we have to jump through, we do it once rather than 15. Unpack that for us. Like, what's wrong with that approach, and what would give you the, some bad vibes about doing that in Michigan?
So I think it limits your vendor pool, first off.
Totally.
And so it inherently then it lowers your competition, which lowers, the quality of your contract at the end of
Lowers
the day.
quality, increases price.
Yes.
By definition, I think
Now,
that's a super key point.
is bundling wrong necessarily? No, if it's done correctly.
Right.
Right. Going back to that grant management example. If I have 3 agencies that all need a grant management system, I'm going to bundle that together and bid it out as one. Right.
Yep.
It's when you start to get into the everything under the sun, right? These are all my IT needs for the next year, and we're putting out one bid for it.
Right.
Well, man, you probably only have 2 vendors that can actually do that, and they're subcontracting it, right? And now you're getting into a really weird contractual situation where it would maybe make more sense to maybe you put out one bid, but you say up front you're planning to do multiple awards. They're individual projects, right? These are 15 individual projects. They're just all under one RFP for administrative purposes.
Yep.
But we intend to award 15 contracts off of this one RFP.
Yep.
That might be a way where you could kind of get a benefit from doing a single RFP while still maintaining a good contract at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But you have to think, your IT strategy drives a lot of your procurement strategy. So are you best in breed, right? Where you're looking to get the best, and then you're going to, cobble together all the best and this into a hub, blah, blah, blah. Right. Or are you, we're doing one entity and then every spoke and wheel, and then everything branches off of that. And so when you talk about bundling, I would want to think about, okay, how do these relate to each other? Yep. How are they going to work with each other? Do they work with each other at all? Or are they clearly separate things that really have no connection other than they're being paid for out of the same pot of money?
Right. Yeah. And I think related to that, it's, it's kind of the difference in my mind between delegating and abdicating, right? Like I would argue that you can't delegate the IT decisions that you're making to an SI, right? That's actually probably more of an abdication. And because you're going to have to deal with those issues at some point. They're going to show up during implementation. You're going to have some project kickoff where, half of the people, maybe not half, a quarter of the people who should be in the room are not. And then you got, a quarter of people in the room who don't need to be there. And so right off the tip, you're already like late, right? So defining it, I think this is maybe the key point. Defining what you need and what problems you're trying to solve up front sounds obvious, but is necessary. And if you don't get specific enough on that, those issues will come home to roost at some point, probably during implementation, and then budgets will be over and timelines will be slow.
Right? Yes. Yeah. I don't want to overprescribe, but we have to give good enough requirements so that you understand what we're looking for.
Yeah. Cool. A couple other just maybe quicker topics to cover with you. One is related to sole sourcing, which I know is not a super common practice in Michigan, but it is something that very maybe more likely to be done at like a city, county, K-12 level. But could you maybe walk us through what sole sourcing is and the argument for why it exists?
Sure. So sole sourcing is basically the procurement entity saying, we don't need to bid this, and we're going to go to a single entity because of some reason.
Yeah.
And it circumvents the competitive bid process. Yeah. So in Michigan, we have to competitively bid. It's a statute requirement. But we know there's situations where there really is only one company that can perform the work that we're looking to have done. Whether they're the manufacturer and they don't allow anyone else to install or work on their products, or it's warranty work or what have you. And so what we'll do is we'll put out a competitive solicitation and we'll say, hey, we intend to contract with this one company because we believe they're the only ones that can do it. Yep. This is everyone else's opportunity to say, hey, I can do that too. Yeah. And so we make it a competitive, quote unquote, sole source. We call it an invitation to negotiate, where we give our intent of what we're going to do. And if you think we're wrong, tell us now. Right. And that's really worked out well for us. We've had situations where companies have said, I can do this too. And we're like, okay, we'll pump the brakes. We'll put out a full RFP. And then we've had others where nobody comes to bid and you're like, okay, it confirms what we thought. Now we can move forward with a contract.
Do you like, how common is it and maybe, I don't know, this is a tough question for you to answer, but like just based on your conversations with peers, how common is it that they have this, you must competitively bid everything versus you can do a sole source? And by the way, since it's Michigan law, does every city and county in Michigan have to apply that same law?
So Michigan law does not flow down. So everyone's going to have their own procurement rules and laws and etc. Now, how common is it? It's hard to say. I know some states have more broader, like the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer, can give them exemptions to competitively bidding, or they might even have sole sourcing as one of their competitive solicitation types.
Yeah.
But I know there's a few that treat it like we do, where we
Yeah.
do a competitive sole source to confirm the market.
Totally. Yeah. Which, I think that's something that, not to plug Pursuit, that's actually not a stated goal of this podcast at all. This is to explore. But I think having that intel is a useful thing for
Absolutely.
let's skip forward. And I we talked a lot about like up till now. I'm curious your perspective. There's so much going on in technology today, particularly around AI and security. But I'd love to like spend just a minute and look forward. So 5 years from now, I mean, who knows where AI is going to be in 5 years, right? But like, what do you think will stay the same actually about public procurement? Like, what's not going to change?
I think it's that procurement is a customer service profession. I think that is inherent, and I think it has to stay. I have to know my customers.
Yeah.
I am not spending my money, right? I'm either spending taxpayer money or I'm spending an agency money, right? It's all taxpayer money at the end of the day,
Sure.
but I'm not buying for me. I'm buying for somebody else. And so I need to know them and I need to know their needs. And so what does that mean? That means a lot of personal relationships, a lot of relationship building,
Yeah.
but it also means a human in the decision making process, both when the bid goes out to confirm that the bid is meeting what my customer needs,
Yeah.
but then also in the selection process to confirm that the selected vendor is going to meet my customer's needs.
Yeah.
I think that stays true, and I think that's true both in the public and the private sector.
Yep.
Uh,
Totally. Great
Now, what
point.
I think changes is the tools that help us get there.
Yeah.
Tools that help us draft the RFP, tools that help us review solicitation. Maybe it helps us clear out the marketing fluff, right? And gives us just the bare bones. Tools that help us evaluate our spend and gives us targets for where to, focus our energies. I think there is a lot of procurement assistant tools that are going to be coming soon. And I'm a proponent of AI. I mean, within our office, we've been doing machine learning and predictive analytics for 5-6 years now.
Years.
But I still think Gen AI still has a bit to go before I would jump in, feet first and being like, yeah, let's roll this out to everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's quite there yet. And I think we are riding a bit of like a wave on like, oh, procurement or, AI is going to be great. And then it's like, wait a minute, we're seeing some shortcomings. Oh, no, it's great again. And so when is that going to balance out? And when do we see AI actually delivering real value and not just proposed value?
Do you think, I guess I'm just intellectually curious about like some of the stuff, like particularly around sole sourcing, right? Like if you imagine an AI that knew every bid that everyone submitted and like what they were quoting, what not necessarily just the price they were quoting, but like the features, the functionality, the problems it's solving, you could imagine a world where like some AI has a good understanding of whether something is actually sole sourced versus not. And I'm just curious, like, so there's like, obviously, I think you're right. Gen AI has a bit to go before we're at that level. There's not a product that I know of today that can do that well. But at the same time, like, let's assume that we will get there in the next few years, which potentially not true. But I guess the part I'm curious about is like having that get brought into the procurement statute for a state to be able to say like, no, some AI says that this is actually a sole source thing, or it is not. do you view like an AI agent could be, commissioned by government to be able to verify some of this stuff?
I would probably not be comfortable with that. One, job security, right?
Right.
For the CPO. But I also think that even if AI was 99% accurate, we
Yeah, you
have
would
an
have a human there. Right. Yeah.
obligation to the public. And so I think there is we give an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Even like the AI could tell us, like, hey, this is probably a sole source. Okay, and we're going to verify it to the market. So
Totally.
again, it could be I see it as an additive where it can help us with that market research.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's one where we're like, we're not sure if this is, a good candidate for an invitation to negotiate, or if we should do an RFP.
Right.
And maybe the AI comes back and they're like, with 85% certainty, we think this would be, an invitation to negotiate.
Right.
Cool. Maybe that helps us then drive our decision to then go out to the public with
Yeah,
it.
it does the research. The way I think about AIs today, at least, is it is able to efficiently and scalably, and maybe even profitably, which means different things in a government context than in a private sector context. Actually, go do research and work that like a human just simply did not have the time to go do. Right? Like it could pull all the contracts and go analyze them and say, yeah, actually, we found these three that have similar features and scope. And like now a human can go read those three and say, like, does that really? They could even get on the phone with those agencies and say, did that, here's what we're trying to achieve. Is it the same thing? So like the ability to scalably do research, I think is where I view it as an unlock today, which I think actually would increase the productivity of any given like procurement team, but isn't gonna replace it. At least that's my 5 years from now. What's not
I
going
agree.
to.
I agree.
Cool. Well, listen, man, this has been incredibly valuable. I think we covered everything from like winning your first contract and to how incumbents work and AI agents listening in on different things. But I think this has been a really a great conversation. If someone's walking away from this episode, that they're a cybersecurity company with zero government experience, just summarize it for us. Like, what's the one thing you would tell them?
Understand what you're bidding on. I think that's really, and if you don't understand, ask questions.
Yeah. Know thy customer. Yeah.
Know the customer, right? It's the rule in sales, right? It says it doesn't just apply to public procurement. I think it applies generally. Know what you're bidding on.
Totally. And by the way, like I know we both have kids. It applies to parenting too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, thanks for being on the show, Jared, and for all the Michigan State folks out there listening, go green.
Go white.
Take care, man. See you around.